Czechast, a podcast in English about Czech and Moravian society, history, culture and economy.
Hello and welcome to Czechast, the podcast in English about all things Czech. I'm Vít Pohanka, your host, and today I want to introduce you to someone who I consider a truly courageous Czech woman. My guest is my longtime friend, Jitka Hloušková. For years, Jitka had a stable and well-paid job as the head of the language center at the University of Pardubice. But at one point, she made a bold decision. She left the security of academia to follow her passion. She is now a freelance writer and coach, charting her own course and inspiring others to do the same. So, what made her take such a leap? As she recalls, not everyone understood her decision.
I just remembered a couple of people who said the same thing to me or asked me the same question. What do you mean? Now from here? At this age? What are you going to do? You're crazy. And it wasn't an easy decision to make, and of course it took me some time.
I think Jitka's journey is one of resilience, transformation and courage. But beyond her personal story, we also discuss something she has observed in Czech education. How students and her clients now often focus more on what the teacher or coach expects from them rather than on the actual process of learning.
They were like, okay, but what is the test going to be about? I said, well, you are not going to write a test. We will have an interview about what you have learned. All right, but what are you going to ask me in the interview? So it's this, focusing on mistakes, learning for the teacher, not, or maybe sometimes parents, not for myself.
Jitka is also a published author. Her book, Díky Londýne, Thank You London, came out in 2022, and writing has always played an important role in her life. We talk about what it gives her, both as a personal practice and as a tool she uses in her coaching.
I'm always writing because I also keep journals, various types of journals, and I like it as a self-development tool. I also use writing with my clients, and so I always write something.
And just a little explanation before we start. I had the not-so-bright idea to invite Jitka and record the interview while walking around a little village near Pardubice where she lives. It was a freezing January day, and that is also the reason why you will hear cars in the background from time to time. But we survived and didn't catch a cold. So stay with us as we explore Jitka's story, her reflections on learning, and how writing has become an essential part of her life and work.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.
Who am I? Yeah, well, whenever people ask me this question, I always start with Jitka because it's hard for me to say anything else at the beginning. And I guess it's because I've had lots of different roles in my life. So I always start with Jitka and then I take a couple of seconds to think about what to go on with. So I have a couple of roles, as everybody does, and at the moment one of my biggest roles is a freelance coach, mentor and guide to personal and professional development. I am also a wife, a mother, a friend, a colleague, and I used to be a teacher, interpreter, translator. And I just realized I often forget about my writing because the thing is that I don't dare call myself a writer, because for me, writer is someone who has published several books, and I love writing, but I wouldn't speak about myself as a writer.
Don't be overly modest. I mean, you're a published author. I mean, that's an achievement.
Author sounds more acceptable to me than writer.
Right. And where are we walking right now?
Yeah, right now we are in Mikolovice. Mikolovice is a village near Pardubice. Pardubice is a town situated about 120 kilometers east of Prague. I used to live in Pardubice too, but many years ago we moved to this village, and this is our street. It's called Ohřiště. As you can see, the football ground here, the local footballers made here for their matches, so that's where we are.
But you didn't grow up here, did you?
No, I didn't, no. I grew up in the northeast of Bohemia, not far from Náchod, which is a town situated close to the border with Poland.
Very nice chateau, I think, on the hill.
That's right, and there is a Czech song. Maybe some people know it, remember it. Náchodský zámeček vršku kulatýho.
That's right, yeah. So what was it like growing up there in, I would say, rural Bohemia?
Yes.
In the 20th century?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, it was very rural. I grew up in a small village, almost in the middle of nowhere, and also in the former Sudetenland. You know, the village or the area where I grew up used to be part of the Sudetenland during the Second World War. So it was nice, quiet, interesting growing up there. There were lots of woods, hills, something I miss here. When you look around here, it's all flatland. And we moved quite a lot, a couple of times. My parents and I moved houses several times, but I spent most of my childhood in this village called Horní Dřevíč, just in case anybody knows it.
But we met in the 1980s studying English in Olomouc. Mm-hmm. So where did the English come from?
I started learning it at a relatively, I would say, old age compared to most of my friends, you know, or our colleagues at the university, because I only started learning it at grammar school in Gymnasium in Náchod, and I was 14, and I just fell in love with the language completely. Well, to be honest, the first words I learned in English were from the books by Karl May, you know, about the Wild West. So I just loved words like greenhorn, you know, or old shatter hand, the name of the main hero, and so on. And I just loved the sound of the language.
Allow me, for the benefit of listeners, especially in the US and English-speaking countries, there's very few people who actually know about Karl May. He was this German author, wrote these stories of Wild West. Even though he had never been to the United States, he only went to the US actually much, much later, after he published books like Winnetou and Old Shatterhand and many others. And he only went to New York and Niagara Falls. So he was writing about these kind of fantasies of the American West, but he inspired literally millions of children, including myself. I have to say that I started learning English under his influence as well.
Oh, really?
So it came to you as well, but much later, right?
Yes, a bit later, yeah. So, okay. Yeah, so I started learning English at the age of 14 in the first year of my gymnasium, grammar school studies, and I just fell in love with it.
But you must have had quite a good teacher, no? I mean, if you were then able to go to study at college, university, Palacký University.
Yeah, I had very good teachers. My first very inspirational teacher of English at the grammar school unfortunately passed away when I was in the second year. So in the second half term of the year we had some substitute teachers, but then we got an excellent teacher who wasn't just a teacher, but she was and still is a very inspirational woman for me. After 1989 she also got involved in politics, and she was the vice mayor of Náchod and many other things. And one of the most important things for me was that she was of very much support for me, because at the time, as you know very well, not many people were accepted to study English as a Western language. So, but I just wanted to do it so much, and she said, well, if you want to do it, don't give up. I'm sure you will be able to make your dream come true.
Let me ask you a little bit about your identity. So you grew up in this part of the country which used to be German-speaking. So I suppose your parents moved in, yeah, or your grandparents.
Yeah, it's grandparents. Yeah, it's a long story. Yeah, yeah. So there were some German-speaking people, mixed marriages, and their children and so on. Yeah. So it was, I just remembered, it was one of the things, when I said to my parent that I would love to study English, I remember my dad saying to me, well, I understand you like English and so on, but, wouldn't it be more practical studying German? Because in reality, in real life, it's much more likely that you will come across German-speaking people, native speakers, but how do you think you are ever going to meet a native speaker of English? But I learned German too, but I really preferred to study English.
I suppose what I was asking about was, do you feel some roots in that area of the country? And let me just mention, I remember in those days, and I suppose, I don't know to what extent it still is the reality, but each and every weekend at the student hostel at the university, it would become nearly completely empty because all the students were going back to their families, which I thought was quite a big difference from other European countries, at least in the West. Were you coming back home every weekend?
No, I wasn't, because it was a bit complicated, It was between 4 to 6 hour train journey with changing.
Oh, really?
Yes, with changing trains at least once, sometimes 3 times. So I didn't.
But it was for practical reasons.
It was practical reasons, and also, having grown up in a village in the middle of nowhere, I just loved Olomouc, and I had friends there. So I also had a close friend from Opava who didn't a town in the northeast of Moravia. And she didn't used to go home for every weekend either. So I had also friends there.
But would you say, I started staying in Olomouc over the weekends, and I felt a little bit exceptional. Well, exceptional. I was quite lonely there.
That's right. You're right. The halls of residence used to be almost empty at weekends. Yeah.
So it doesn't sound like you had very strong roots that you would be kind of drawn back home.
I still feel the strong roots there. It's because the area is, well, I'm just hesitating what to say first, because it means lots of things to me. It's an area rich in history, well, many other areas, all country is, but it's the area in Czech, they often say, kraj Boženy Němcové, Aloise Jiráska, the writers.
So these writers, the national revivalist writers, worked and they wrote about as well.
Yeah.
Alois Jirásek and Božena Němcová, of course, famous names.
Karel Čapek and so on. And it's also because in my family, my parents used to tell stories a lot about their life. My mum grew up in another part of the country, so she moved there, but my father grew up there, and he has got he had a lot of stories to tell about, the Second World War, because he grew up in a forest where the fortifications were built,
against the Germans.
Against the Germans. So he had a lot of stories about that. He went to school in Bohdashin, which is a part of a town, Červený Kostelec, and it was the school where, the radio operator Jiří Potůček of the Silver A group was hiding
British,
with...
the British-based Czech parachutists came to the protectorate Bemen und Mähren, and they were they all shot? I'm sorry to ask so abruptly, but this group Silver.
In the end, they all
they were caught by the Nazis, basically.
Yes, so it is the history, the stories, the countryside, and everything. So I really feel my roots are
attachment,
there. Attachment. Yeah.
Let's now make a kind of big leap forward. You've had such an interesting professional life. I don't want to speak for yourself. What did you do? And try to be very, very brief now.
Okay, I'll try to be very, very brief. I started as a teacher. I taught at an elementary school for a couple of months. Then I taught at a grammar school, gymnasium, for 3 years. And then I had a small business, or we were, for women, we had a small business, and it was basically translating business and economic information about then Czechoslovakia, later Czech Republic, for international databases.
I'm sorry to jump in. This would be like early 90s?
1990s.
1990s.
Yeah. And in between, my daughter was born, and then because I'm a person who needs a change from time to time. I cannot do the same thing for a very long time, neither, professionally nor in my personal life. So then I just thought, okay, I need a change. And also, to be honest, with the internet, when a lot of information, of course, started to be available for free, even economic business information, the business started dying slowly after the year 2000. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do? I have had quite enough of translating, because it means sitting, spending a lot at that time. Now with AI and everything, it's a little bit different. But at that time, it meant a lot of sitting in front of the computer and interpreting, all right, but my daughter is quite small. Interpreting often means a lot of traveling, so I'm not sure I want to do that. And then this job vacancy arose at the University of Pardubice. So then I started working at the language center of the University Pardubice, where I worked for 17 years, and after some time I just felt this need for a change again, almost an urge. So I thought, okay, what can I do? Because I wasn't sure. Things had changed, as more and more people are speaking English. English is not a profession as it used to be in the early 1990s. If people spoke good English, they could do almost anything, but it changed in the meantime, and I felt like, okay, if I want a major change, if I want to leave academia, what am I going to do? So I'm just thinking how to make it short. So, in the meantime, I also did a course in creative writing, because I needed some kind of... I thought, okay, I want to meet new people, other people, and because I taught mainly academic and scientific English, I kind of started missing, literature and things like that.
kind of the wealth of the language.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
how rich it is, yeah.
Yes, and also what was interesting for me, I started to be more interested in Czech because I studied Czech and English at the university in Olomouc, but English was always my passion, priority and everything, and all of a sudden I felt, I think I'm interested in Czech as well, because I love language as such, as a phenomenon. And I also noticed how Czech is changing. And I thought, I think I would like to write in Czech. So I did a course in creative writing and later wrote a novel. And then I thought, okay, but this is not something I could do for a living. So what am I going to do? So I asked Uncle Google for help, and I Googled, and Uncle Google offered me this, it was a kind of a weekend self-development course, and it was explained that it's for people like me, for example, who are looking for a change but are not sure what it should be and so on. And it was a personal development course, but it was there when I first came across with coaching and some coaching techniques, because the course leader was an excellent coach too. So in the course from time to time he used some coaching techniques, and I just thought, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to learn. I became a coach.
I asked you for a short, kind of brief explanation of what you did. No, but I mean, just to sum it up. So you were a teacher, you had a small private business, then you were a teacher again, but I mean on a different level, at the university level. But what I admired you and why I wanted to speak to you was, let's be open about this. I mean, we've been around for some time, and it's not easy to make changes once you get to the north side of 50. And I'm sorry that I'm so brutal about it, but it's... what was it like? I mean, you know, you had your comfortable life in the academia, and I mean, just to explain, you were the head of the language center of Pardubice University, right?
Yes.
So you were kind of mid-management. Retirement is, whether we like it or not, getting closer and closer. And you throw it all away, and you go freelance. I mean, Jitka, what are you doing?
You're right, yeah. I just remembered a couple of people who said the same thing to me or asked me the same question. What do you mean? Now from here? At this age? What are you going to do? You're crazy. And it wasn't an easy decision to make, and of course it took me some time, but I just felt the need for a change was so strong, I just couldn't stay there. And there were many, many reasons. It would be another long story. But I also thought, I said to myself, if you really want to make the change, it's right time, because yes, I was 56 when I decided to leave the stability of an open-ended contract at the university and go freelance, yes.
Were there moments when you regretted?
Never. I thought there would be moments, because I was scared. I wasn't sure what my career was going to develop like and how it was going to be. So yeah, there were lots of worries and insecurities, and I thought maybe there will be a day when I say to myself, I regret what I've done, but luckily it has never happened.
So it's been how long now since you made that fateful decision?
4 years.
4 years.
4.5.
And you are around. I mean, obviously. I mean, you didn't have to come back begging for a job again, something like that. So, coaching, what is it like?
What is it like?
Who do you work with?
You mean who my clients are? Or?
Yeah, who your clients are. Yeah. That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. Well, because I've got lots of experience with education. I spent most of my professional life in education. The biggest part, the most years were there. So I offer my services to educators, schools, also students. It was, in fact, one of the many reasons why I decided to leave the university was that I could see, feel the need for changes in education everywhere, and I'd had this training and I had something to offer, and I'm just trying to think how to say it in a nice way, because, I just thought I want to support changes, and it's not working from the inside really, and so maybe I could do this from the outside. And in the 4 years that I've been working freelance, I can feel that lots of things have changed even in this respect. Before, hardly anybody knew what coaching was, but now more and more people have heard of it, have experienced it. So, I've just realized I also have some, from time to time, some workshops for academics or PhD students at the university. So I am really grateful for this, because I can come back now, because I left, I think, at the right time, in the sense of that I really had very good relationships with the people there. So now I can offer some of my services to them too, and I'm grateful that they feel that I can be useful for them. So also, academics, PhD students, young researchers, who else? Also, people in creative professions often come, because for creatives some things are difficult, planning, organizing, and so on. So, and also people, from the general public, just anyone who needs support to make changes in their life or things like that.
I nearly forgot. When I was preparing for this interview, I was quite surprised to learn that the word coach, and I learned that on the online etymology dictionary, the word coach, meaning instructor or a trainer, first appeared around 1830 at Oxford University, and it was actually a slang expression for a private tutor who carried a student through an exam. So it was initially used in the kind of academic context, and it was only later on in the 1860s when it started to be used in the kind of sporting, athletics context, etc. And I think quite interestingly, modern coaching, which you practice now, was formalized as a discipline in the 1970s, but it wasn't until a little bit later, I would say, especially in the 1990s, that people like, and here I learned about Thomas Leonard, helped to shape what we now call life coaching. He founded the International Coach Federation. Around the same time, in Europe, organizations like the European Mentoring and Coaching Council were established, setting up guidelines and professional standards for coaching. And I found all of that, I'm sorry about my ignorance, quite surprising. It was quite a long development, and I didn't realize that the concept of coaching really had such deep roots. And I thought it was good to mention that. But we are now in a Czech culture. It all came from the West. So what kind of role do you think coaching can play in the Czech culture? Is there a difference, perhaps? Or where did you, when you learned about coaching, I mean, did you get some books that were written by Czechs, or were they all from other countries?
It's a good question. I need to look for books written by Czechs about coaching. Yeah, I read books in English or some translations, and I'm trying to. Yes, of course. I
there is some literature.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I've just remembered a couple of names.
You are listening to Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. I'm Vít Pohanka, and my guest today is professional coach and writer Jitka Hloušková.
Let me mention one thing. It might seem kind of far-stretched, but I think it concerns coaching as well. When I was in the US as a correspondent, I started skydiving. It sounds a little bit exotic. But when I When I started skydiving, my instructors, and I would say coaches, they in the US, I mean, they always started with what is positive, what I did right. And then they told me what I didn't do right, but they were always trying to be on the positive side. My general experience, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but with my, I would say, teachers and coaches in Czechia, there's definitely more tendency in the Czech culture, I think, to say, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. And if you do something right, it's not always even mentioned, you know. And I think this kind of connects with coaching, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. Yeah. Because it's modern coaching is also based on the latest findings of neuroscience. So it's brain friendly, and brain can only learn new things when it's in a positive state. When it doesn't have to resolve things such as stress or anxiety or panic and so on. So yeah, you're right. Absolutely, it's.
And again, I don't want to overgeneralize, but it seems to me kind of typical that this kind of tendency, let's go for the positive rather than the negative, comes more from the West to the Czech culture than it would be kind of inborn here and in place, or natural.
Yes, you're right. I haven't thought about it in this way before, but I see your point. Yeah, and I agree. Yeah.
I suppose I was asking, is it difficult, to change this, or do you see some kind of new trend with the new generation of Czechs, that they are more used, to this positive attitude than the older generation?
I would say yes, it is a generation thing, but on the other hand, young people, the schools they have attended are mostly traditional, the traditional system, which, again, when we went to school, and unfortunately, I'm afraid this hasn't changed much, we were always monitored for how many mistakes we made. So this is what... So, yeah, I just remembered again, when I started to use coaching approach, even when I was teaching at the university, I could see how everything changed, the atmosphere changed. It made my job easier, my role easier, but for the students it was very difficult in the beginning, because they were like, okay, but what is the test going to be about? I said, well, you are not going to write a test. We will have an interview about what you have learned. All right, but what are you going to ask me in the interview? So it's this, focusing on mistakes, learning for the teacher, not, or maybe sometimes parents, not for myself. So, and because I did some research and specialized in learner autonomy, among other things, before. And when I started training and coaching, many things just clicked in. I thought, well, coaching sports, taking responsibility for your own life into your own hands. And this is what I had always wanted from my students, Sometimes we call it the ownership of learning. It's your learning. You want to learn. And it's a matter of motivation, of course, and so on. So with younger generation, it may be a bit different, because very often young people look for other places and people to learn apart from schools and universities, because they are afraid the schools are not preparing them for their practical life, careers and so on. So they have learned about coaching. I can see the difference now compared to a couple of years ago. So with the younger generation, it may be different. And otherwise, with Czechs, well, it's different in business. Of course, business coaching is specific, leadership, managers.
And that's, I suppose, pretty internationalized already.
Yes.
I suppose, because this is Czechast, I'm trying to ask, do you think there is a specific way in which Czechs react to coaching? Do you think there is something special about coaching in the Czech kind of culture and the Czech society?
Well, what I find specific in a way is related to the the newness of the profession itself, that it's relatively new, and people are distrustful sometimes. And whereas in the West, it's part of, I would say, not everyday life, that maybe not, but people know about the benefits much more. And here, I think it's much less recognized as a profession than in other countries.
And is it changing, do you think?
It is changing, yeah. I think it's also connected with, life in the globalized world, modern world, the rapid changes, everything changes so rapidly, and it's difficult to adapt to all the changes. And the generation things, young generations, Gen Z and so on, they grew up in a world that was very different to the world we grew up, and they often look for support. And as I said, because many young people have heard of coaching, they look specifically for coaching.
Right. I don't want to be overly optimistic when it comes to younger generation, but I think, that there is, it's necessary to be flexible, and I think that younger people are kind of reflecting that. Right?
Yes, I agree, yeah.
Let me jump here again a little bit to your writing. You published a book, Thank You London, based on your, and I dare say slightly my own, other shared experience from London in the 1980s. How easy or difficult was it for you to go into creative writing, to make the step, to take the step?
It wasn't, I wouldn't say easy or difficult, but it was something new to me because unlike many other authors who say, for example, I have always wanted to be a writer. I started writing when I was a kid and so on. I wasn't like that. I have always loved language, but more, language as a system, linguistics and so on. And I always had an enormous respect to literature.
For creative writing.
But then there were many reasons why I decided to give it a try. And one of them was encouragement and motivation from my English friend, who I met in person in 1988 during our shared experience, as you said, in London. But we had been writing since 1981. We had been pen pals for years. And she was, you're into languages, you love books, you like literature, so why don't you write a book about our story? People would be interested. And I knew she was right, because many people thought we met when the British people started, traveling to Prague after the revolution, but we had had a longer story of our friendship. So I thought, okay. And then, because we see each other several times a year, so she asked me, so Jitka, when are you going to write your book? And I said, And one day when she was driving me to the airport, when I was on my way back home again, she said in the car, it's always but. It's always buts. Just find yourself a creative writing course and just do it. And I came home and thought, maybe she's right. So I did. I found a creative writing course, and I thought, okay, I'll give it a try and see how it goes. Maybe I won't like it. Maybe nobody else will be interested in what I'll be writing. But I really liked it, and I got some feedback from people which was quite encouraging. So I ended up writing a book.
Are you writing something now?
Well, I'm always writing because I also keep journals, various types of journals, and I like it as a self-development tool. I also use writing with my clients, and so I always write something. And I have also started writing another book, and it's based on my parents' stories, because they had an interesting life. And as I mentioned, the area where I grew up, I just thought it's worth writing about, adapting their life story into a book.
That's all for today's episode of Czechast. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jitka Hloušková, a woman who truly embodies the courage to follow her passion. If you found her story inspiring, don't forget to subscribe and share the podcast with others who might enjoy it too. And make sure to tune in next time, because I have a very special guest, someone making history in the world of classical music.
My name is Jakub Hrouša, and I am a Czech conductor who's got a beautiful, fulfilling international career with amazing jobs about which I never really dreamt, because it's really so much beyond what I expected in my life, but really the top work internationally, especially in London, Bamberg and Prague. These three cities being my home, basically, especially in terms of family, London and Prague. And I am a passionate music lover whose vocation is to share this passion with public and spark the enthusiasm which I feel for music generally in them, together with the orchestras and opera houses I'm leading.
So that's Jakub Hrouša, the world-renowned Czech conductor who will soon take over as the music director of the Royal Opera House in London's Covent Garden. In the next episode of Czechast, we talk about his journey, his deep love for music, and what it means to take on one of the most prestigious positions in the opera world. You won't want to miss it. If you like Czechast, I'd really appreciate if you could follow or like the podcast on your favorite platform. It helps more people discover these stories. And if you have any thoughts, feedback or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to leave a comment or get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Vít Pohanka. Thanks for listening, stay well and curious, and naslyšenou.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.